If A/B testing is faster at getting results than a usability test is, then should user research teams change their strategy? Maybe even do less user research? During our September virtual UX conference, Dr. Jacob Nielsen shares his thoughts on this question.
It's an interesting tension here between the sort of almost immediate feedback you get from A/B testing. Well, only immediate if you have a large user pool, obviously. But if you have a lot of traffic, then you can pretty quickly get an A/B test result. And some people will say, well, that's faster. We can just put it up there, and 2 days later we know, as opposed to it may take 2 weeks to do user research. But to me, I don't actually really believe in this argument. First of all, it doesn't have to take 2 weeks to do user research. Now, it probably does if you're planning a study, doing a study, analyzing a study, producing the report. However, you can also have continuous user research always ongoing. This is actually one of the things I really like to recommend that very few people do. But if it's Wednesday, it's user day. And it's like every Wednesday you have 4 people or 5 people come in, or you have connected, set up appointments to go and have an online session with them, whatever. You don't know in advance what you're going to be testing, but 1 or 2 days before, you poll, your team, and what are your questions right now? What would you like to get some user data on? And that's what you test that Wednesday. It could be Thursday, whatever day it is, but just continuous, ongoing, pre-planned. In that way, you're not going to have to wait. You can get your user data right away when you have a question. So that's one thing. It can actually, usability studies can actually be done at almost any speed if you plan for it. It doesn't have to be slow. But the second one is, I think, is a more serious problem, which is that A/B testing is really, in many ways, a rather weak methodology for gaining insights. I mean, sometimes you get an answer, but you don't get much of the why. So you have 2 design variations, right? And one does a little bit higher than the other, and so yeah, the one that does higher is the better one, but that's only within those exact 2 design variations. And so if you don't know why, then you haven't learned some lessons that can apply to like the next screen you're designing, or the next feature you're designing, or the next product you're designing. And so that is extra information you gain from user research, where you're actually observing people's behavior. So I do feel that is much more valid for many things. Sometimes there are just small, subtle design distinctions that we couldn't, if by observing users, tell if one is better than the other. But one is 0.5% better than the other, but it's just so little small difference that we can't tell with 5 users, or even with 20 users, we couldn't tell. And so we would have to run thousands of users. But then that's exactly what A/B testing is good for. So 2 different shades of blue, I think, was the classic example of that, or which one is better. Well, you put them up there, and then you can see a 0.5% difference. You can tell that after you've gotten several thousand users on it. But if a big website, you get that pretty quickly. So A/B testing definitely has a lot of advantages as well. But I don't think that the fact that we have this methodology available, and it's quite easy with cloud-based or internet-based or web-based services, it's quite easy to get A/B data. That doesn't mean that that's what we should really mainly rely on to drive our design decisions, because you get a very weak insight into why. Also, of course, I mean, the entire word implies, or name implies, that you have to have generated A and B. So how are you going to generate A and B? I mean, you can sit around the meeting table and guess for ideas that you might like to design or might to try. But first of all, hopefully you can get more than 2 ideas. And so now all of a sudden you're talking about a multivariate, very complex test that can take a long time to get significant data on. But secondly, again, that's all based on your own thinking, like to come up with the 2 or 3 variants that you want to test. And so this is again where I strongly prefer that you are not just driven by your personal intuition about what would be interesting to test, but by insights derived from the actual customers on things that they find easy or difficult or interesting or exciting or whatever type of goal you have, but by watching these people. That really drives design inspiration. I mean, many people think usability testing is just for debugging of, I have a design, let me just like smooth over the rough edges. And that's certainly one of the things you do. but it's just as much for your own good to drive your own inspiration derived from customers or users, not inspiration just derived from yourself, just sitting and thinking on yourself, right? But thinking based on users.